Why do you have an appendix?
Somewhere inside you right now, there's a small dead-end tube attached to your gut. It does almost nothing most of your life, and it can kill you in under 24 hours. For over a century, doctors told you it was garbage. Useless leftover tissue, a construction error evolution forgot to clean up. Textbooks called it vestigial. Surgeons removed it from healthy people just in case, on the theory that you'd never miss it. They were wrong. Not about the danger, about the uselessness. Let's actually look at this thing because the real story is stranger and more useful than evolution messed up. First, where it actually is, because most people get this wrong. Your large intestine starts on the lower right side of your abdomen, in a pouch called the cecum. The appendix hangs off the bottom of that pouch, a narrow tube, usually about 3 to 4 inches long, roughly the width of a pencil. It has one opening.
It connects to the gut.
And it goes nowhere else. It's not part of digestion. Food doesn't pass through it. Nothing needs to travel down that tube for you to eat, absorb nutrients, or survive a single day. Which is exactly why, for most of medical history, it looked like the textbook definition of useless. Charles Darwin himself proposed, in 1871, that the appendix was a shrunken remnant of a larger organ our plant-eating ancestors once used to digest tough vegetation, an organ we no longer needed because our diet had changed. For over 100 years, that idea more or less stuck, vestigial, leftover, safe to remove. Here's where it starts to fall apart. If an organ is truly vestigial, truly useless, you'd expect evolution to have gotten rid of it a long time ago. Losing unnecessary tissue isn't hard for evolution. It happens constantly. Snakes lost their legs, cave fish lost their eyes. Structures with zero function tend to shrink, get simpler, and eventually disappear over enough generations, because building and maintaining tissue costs energy for no return. The appendix didn't disappear. And here's the detail that should have been the first clue. It evolved independently more than 30 separate times, in more than 30 different mammal lineages, including several primates, several rodents, and a number of totally unrelated groups. That's not what a useless leftover looks like. That's what a repeatedly useful structure looks like, something evolution kept rebuilding on its own, in completely different branches of the mammal family tree, because it kept solving a real problem. Researchers led by Heather Smith and William Parker, publishing analyses in 2009 and 2013, mapped the appendix onto the mammalian family tree and found exactly this pattern.
Independent origins.
Over and over, in lineages that split apart tens of millions of years before any of them had an appendix. Something kept reinventing this structure. That's usually a sign it's doing a job. So what's the job? Look at the tissue itself under a microscope, and the story changes immediately. The wall of the appendix is packed with lymphoid tissue, the same kind of tissue found in your tonsils and lymph nodes. Tissue whose entire purpose is training and supporting your immune system. In infants and young children, the appendix is especially dense with this tissue. It reaches peak development around the age of 20 to 30, then gradually thins out as you get older, similar to the pattern seen in other immune tissue like the thymus. An organ with no job doesn't build a concentrated pocket of immune training tissue and time its development to your childhood immune system's growth. That's investment, not waste. But the theory that really reframed the appendix came from a different question entirely. Where does your gut get its bacteria back after it's been wiped out? Your intestines are packed with trillions of bacteria, a whole ecosystem, essential for digestion, immune regulation, and general health. Under normal conditions, that ecosystem is stable and self-sustaining. But it isn't always stable. Severe diarrheal illness, the kind caused by cholera or dysentery, can flush the gut so completely that the resident bacterial population crashes. Historically, before modern medicine, this kind of illness was common and often lethal, largely because a wiped-out gut struggles to recover the balance of bacteria it needs. In 2007, researchers at Duke University, led by immunologist William Parker, proposed a specific explanation for the appendix based on exactly this problem.
They suggested the appendix functions
As a safe house, a protected reservoir where a sample of the gut's beneficial bacteria can survive an infection that clears out the main intestine. The reasoning goes like this. The appendix sits at a dead end, off to the side of the main flow of gut contents. It has a narrow opening. Waste and pathogens moving through the main intestine mostly bypass it. Meanwhile, the immune tissue lining the appendix produces a protective coating, a biofilm, that shelters a small colony of beneficial bacteria inside the tube, insulated from whatever is happening in the main gut. If the main intestine gets flushed clean by illness, that isolated colony survives, untouched, in the appendix. Then, once the crisis passes, it can recolonize the rest of the gut, restoring the bacterial balance from a protected backup copy. A bunker, a biological seed vault for your gut bacteria, positioned exactly where it wouldn't get hit by the same disaster, wiping out everything around it. There's supporting evidence beyond the theory itself. A 2011 study by researchers, including Parker and colleagues, found that people without an appendix, whether removed surgically or absent for other reasons, were more likely to experience a recurrence of a specific type of severe intestinal infection, a bacteria called Clostridium difficile, compared to people who still had theirs. That's consistent with losing a recovery reservoir, not losing a useless tube. So, why did this theory take so long to surface, and why did it take even longer to become widely accepted? Partly because, for most of the 20th century, in wealthy countries with clean water and modern sanitation, severe diarrheal disease became rare. The exact crisis the appendix appears built to help you survive essentially stopped happening to most people in those countries. An organ's usefulness can become invisible if the disaster it's designed for no longer shows up. Which brings us to the part of this story that hasn't gone away and never fully will. The same design that makes the appendix a useful reservoir also makes it a trap. That narrow opening, the one that shelters bacteria from the main gut flow, can also get blocked. Sometimes by hardened stool, sometimes by swollen lymphoid tissue, sometimes for reasons doctors still can't identify in a given case. Once blocked, the appendix can't drain. Bacteria that were harmless as a protected reservoir suddenly have nowhere to go. They multiply inside a sealed tube. Pressure builds. The wall of the appendix, which has a comparatively thin blood supply to begin with, starts to lose circulation. This is appendicitis, and it moves fast. Within about 24 to 72 hours of the blockage, the wall of the appendix can die from lack of blood flow and rupture.
Once that happens,
Infectious material spills directly into the abdominal cavity, causing peritonitis, a serious, potentially fatal infection of the abdominal lining. Before appendectomy became a routine, reliable surgery in the late 19th century, appendicitis was frequently fatal. It's still today one of the most common reasons for emergency abdominal surgery worldwide, with roughly 100,000 cases occurring in the United States alone each year. So here's the actual picture, and it's a stranger one than useless organ or vital organ. Both descriptions are incomplete on their own. The appendix appears to be a genuinely useful structure, an immune training site, a bacterial reservoir, evolved independently over and over because it solved a real survival problem in a world with frequent, severe gut infections and no modern medicine to fall back on. And that exact structure, a narrow, protected, hard-to-drain pocket, is also inherently vulnerable to blockage and catastrophic infection, precisely because of the features that make it useful in the first place. It isn't a leftover mistake, it's a genuine trade-off, a structure built to help you survive one kind of disaster that, under the wrong conditions, becomes a disaster of its own. You can live a full, completely normal life without an appendix. People who've had it removed generally do fine, especially in places with clean water, modern sanitation, and medical care available if their gut bacteria ever needs restoring some other way. But you can live without it was never the same question as it does nothing. Plenty of useful things are things you can also survive losing. So the next time someone tells you the appendix is a pointless evolutionary leftover, you can give them the more accurate version. It's not a leftover, it's a backup system, built by evolution more than 30 separate times for a threat that used to be common and occasionally still is. You are not broken. You are carrying a bunker most of your life never needs, for a disaster your ancestors couldn't afford to risk going without.